Now we're going to move on to our guest speaker. I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Coral Springs Emergency Manager Alexander Falcone, who's going to give us a few updates regarding hurricane season and COVID. Alex?
Thank you, Ron, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Even virtually, I do miss the in-person meetings at the Carolina Club, but it's good to be here nonetheless. So Cindy asked that I reach out and speak to you all. My name is Alexander Falcone. I'm the city's Director of Emergency Management, Security and Special Events for the city of Coral Springs, and happy to be here today and kind of go over a couple things related to COVID, and also talk about hurricane season and some steps moving forward for the business community. So as you know, COVID's kind of taken us all by storm, and the city is no different. We're not immune to this either. So we've been working very diligently to try to make sure that we're keeping our residents and businesses safe, and making sure that we're trying to navigate this in the most effective way possible. So a couple of little things, just some back. Whenever we have a emergency or another serious situation such as COVID, we generally will declare a state of emergency in the city. And one of the reasons that we declare a state of emergency in the city is because it allows us to have certain exemptions and also allows us to enact certain protocols. So an example of that, when our mayor declares a state of emergency, it diverts procurement authority to our city manager. That allows us to start to procure things very, very rapidly. It allows us to seek out, businesses and services that are needed without the general labor-intensive process that is in place on a normal day-to-day operation. So thankfully, we declared a state of emergency in the city very early at the beginning of March. And as a result of that, we were able to outfit our first responders with a lot of the necessary PPE, N95 masks, vital oxide sprayers, surgical masks, and things like that early on in this, so that we actually never had a supply shortage here in the city of Coral Springs. And that's important because it allows us to continue to provide essential services and operations, not just on the emergency services side, but also on the general city government side. So that's something that we're very proud of. Another thing that the city does when we're faced with a unprecedented emergency is we activate our incident command structure, or ICS. What the incident command structure does is it takes all of the personnel in our organization and it puts them under one management structure that's very streamlined. This is different than how we operate normally because we put people in positions based upon their abilities, not necessarily based upon their specific job functions. So for example, our safety and security branch is composed of both the police department, the fire department, and the code office. Generally speaking, those entities would be in different departments, but under ICS, they all work collectively to provide for our overall safety and security here in the city of Coral Springs. That's important because it allows us to switch priorities and allows us to focus on problems very, very quickly. A good example of that is the food distribution that we were fortunate enough to provide here in the city of Coral Springs. We partnered with Feeding South Florida. We partnered with the mall. Jeff over at the Carl Square Mall partnered with us, and we were able to provide food distribution daily. And in order for that to work, we had support from police, fire, parks, public works, as well as some business community and other entities. So our incident command structure works to support that and works for the city to transition very, very quickly. Another aspect of our city's response has been trying to engage key stakeholders. One of the things that our commission was very adamant on, and our city manager, Frank Babnick, was very adamant on, is we need to make sure that we have the involvement of our business community. So as a result of that, we formed our Economic Recovery Task Force. And the Economic Recovery Task Force is a group of business leaders and community leaders here that serve essentially as an advisory council on current conditions in the market, as well as consequences of emergency orders. So an example of that, the county has passed several emergency orders. The last emergency order was focused specifically on a curfew for restaurants and in-person dining. At 10 p.m. in Broward County, you have to vacate the premise of a a dining establishment. Our Economic Recovery Task Force provides our city leadership with feedback on those orders. And in the example I provided, the feedback was that 10 p.m. does not allow for a second seating at most restaurants. And so we're able to take that information back, present it to the county leadership, and attempt to get those orders amended or changed. Currently, the way that this virus has kind of progressed, in the beginning stages, the city was issuing a lot of emergency orders at the local level. As the county caught up and started to issue emergency orders of their own, we started to pull back and repeal our orders that were either duplicating that of the county or were in conflict of the county. So today what we have is a system in which we're abiding by county emergency orders, and there are no additional city requirements in place. So that's a direct result of that recovery task force and feedback from the business community. So I want to go over that. Where are we going from here? So as a city, we've tried to focus on a couple of key factors to help us navigate this virus. First, we have near daily meetings with our healthcare providers, working with Jared over at Broward Health Coral Springs to get real-time information as far as what the hospital conditions look like. And that helps us to make decisions as to how severe this is, helps us make decisions on how widespread this is in our local community and move from there. The second aspect that we're working on is really ramping up the availability of testing here in the city of Coral Springs. We are actually the top test site in Broward County. We opened an FDOH site at Mullins Park, and it is the most highly utilized test site anywhere in Broward County. So we're testing at the peak. We were close to 1,000 folks per day tested at that site. Right now, we're averaging about 600 people per day. And in total, we're now over roughly 22,000 people tested at that site. So we're going to continue to increase testing availability here in the city. We have partnered with a couple of agencies such as One Blood and ITM, Innovative Transfusion Medicines, who are providing blood donations. And when you donate blood, you get a free antibody test kit. We're going to continue to provide that to our residents. And also, we're working with the Department of Health to establish a drive-through testing site with the future goal of that being distribution for vaccines when that does become available. So the City of Coral Springs is a member of something called the City Readiness Initiative, or CRI for short. And that initiative works with local governments to establish points of distribution for vaccination in the event that we had a mass pandemic or other concerns. So that's one of the reasons why we got a Department of Health testing site, because we were part of that initiative. And that is also on the horizon for vaccine distribution if that does become available, which we hope it will shortly. So for COVID, that's kind of where we're at as a city. And I know when I speak at the chamber, we're usually a one-way communication, but I'm happy to answer questions on that. And on hurricane season, a couple of quick highlights of what we're doing here at the city. Obviously, we've had to change up our operations with Hurricane Isaias that came very close to us here not that long ago. We actually had an opportunity to test out some of our procedures. So the good news is, from the city's perspective, we still have the capability for us to operate out of our emergency operations center. We still have the capability to work with backup and redundant systems. So we're not dependent upon Zoom or the internet in order to conduct city business during emergencies. So we will still be there. We will still be operating out of our EOC to provide services back to you all. And we've also tested our rapid testing capabilities. So every 6 weeks, all of our first responders are tested for COVID. And when we have a hurricane or other recall, we've partnered with the lab to provide our first responders with COVID testing. Why is that important? Well, in emergency operations, we often can't social distance. We can't use Zoom or Microsoft Teams to stay apart. And so through the COVID-19 testing, we're able to make sure that all of our essential workers are healthy, so that we're not losing a significant portion of our workforce when our community needs it most. So we have some additional backup plans in place there, and we'll continue to operate moving forward. For the business community in particular, a couple of developments that we've had. We still have our business hotline up and running, which can be called at any time for assistance during a storm or otherwise. And that number is 954-344-5772. And I'm sure Cindy can share that information as well. But that hotline is a direct connection back to our economic recovery office during a storm, and during normal operations, our economic development office. So they'll be more than happy to take your questions as they're related to COVID or related to a potential hurricane, and go from there. One piece of advice I will give to everybody on this call, and something that we're taking very seriously at the city, is the predictions have been very, very consistent that we will have an above active hurricane season this year. Now, above active, if every storm goes into Mexico or the Caribbean, we're spared, and it may not be a busy season here, but the fact of the matter is the likelihood of us experiencing a tropical event is higher. We know that we're having supply chain issues and shortages as a result of COVID. So what we're doing here at the city is we actually, while we may wait to order some supplies, we've actually been very proactive and ordered most of our hurricane supplies ahead of time. And that's something that I would recommend your businesses do as well, because our supply chains are already experiencing some difficulties as it relates to COVID. We're going to experience those difficulties if we're faced with the tropical event as well. So that's something I would certainly recommend on this call, to take the time now on a blue sky day to get prepared, and then you'll have that and you'll be ready to go in the event that we face something more significant. And the final piece that I'll let you know, our office has been working very closely with the chamber and with Cindy to develop an outline for business of continuity operations, and also working with our IT department to prepare a cybersecurity guide that we can provide to all the chamber membership, to show you guys kind of some of the best practices we've implemented here at the city, and some of the practices we've utilized to avoid some of the threats that we face. And a perfect example is what we're experiencing here at COVID. Our continuity of operations plan focused on what would we do if we lost our personnel, what would we do if we lost our technology, and what would we do if we lost our building. And we've had to face two of those scenarios. We've lost the use of our building because we've had to social distance, and we've lost the use of certain personnel because they've been sick or unable to come in. And so by taking those best practices and those tenets, you can apply that to your business to make sure that whatever you face in the future, whether it's a pandemic, a hurricane, a weather event, a supply chain disruption, by following those backup protocols at the city, we've been able to maneuver very, very quickly and nimbly to keep our essential operations up and running, even when faced with loss of facility and loss of personnel. And the final piece of that is we know that cybersecurity and cyber attacks are on the rise. It's unfortunate, but these groups take advantage of crisis. And during this COVID-19 crisis, we have watched attacks on local government skyrocket for malware, for phishing attempts, and for other types of cyber crime. And at the city, one of the things that we've implemented is a couple of different training protocols. We've implemented some software such as Mimecast that blocks suspicious links and emails, and that's helped to protect our workforce. So our information technology director, Stephen Dwyer, is very, very knowledgeable on cybersecurity, and he's put together, and something that the chamber will offer in the future, he's put together a cybersecurity resilience program to help you guys and to show you guys some of the best practices the city's implemented to make sure we're keeping our IT infrastructure up and running. So, Cindy, I don't want to take up the whole morning and everybody's time here, but Ron, I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have them, and you guys can always reach out to me directly. My email is afalcone@carlsprings.org, and you could also reach me at 954-295-0565. If you have questions, concerns, or need anything from the city, please feel free to reach out. So.